So we call the Guthrie Edmond Regional Airport Board meetings to order Tuesday, April the 8th. So we have no sign-ups for public comments or announcements. So we'll move on to item 3, which would be a discussion and considering possible to approve the minutes. Here last past airport board meeting. So moved. Second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Item passes. Item 3, number 4, discussion, consideration of possible action to approve the monthly financials last meeting.
So moved.
Moved. Second. Moved and seconded. Those in favor? Those opposed? Item number 4. Item number 5 would be discussion and consideration of action to recommend approval for the master engineering agreement for professional services between the city of Guthrie and Park Hill.
Yes, so a few months ago, the airport board received submittal of qualifications, and the consultant selection committee approved Park Hill to be our next engineer. We've worked on this agreement. I don't have that agreement printed in your packets because it was about 40 pages long, but I do have a copy here with me if any of you would like to review it. It's a very generic document. It's crafted that way on purpose because it's supposed to cover everything that our airport could possibly do within the next 5 years. And so it'll have everything. They can do hangars. They're going to do our taxiway. They're going to get contracted for our terminal building, large scale projects like that. There is really no difference in language between this agreement and the previous agreement that we had with Park Hill before.
Is that the same agreement you sent out in the packets
Yes.
on Friday? Okay.
Any questions or comments?
They lead the way on DEQ stuff. And what about archaeological finds? You know, I always threatened if I wanted to stop a project, I'd go out there in the middle of the night and bury a dinosaur bone. And the next day, the whole thing gets shut down. You know what I'm saying?
You know, I don't know anything about the archaeology stuff, but I will say, as far as DEQ goes, Toby with Park Hill has assured me that if we were to do, for example, the stormwater detention pond or something like that, we could go and work with our partners at Myers Engineering with the city, since they had already done the preliminary work on that. If Park Hill were to do it, they'd have to either ask for Myers stuff, which is kind of a liability for their company, or just start over, which would be more costly for the city. That was one of the reasons we selected Park Hills, because Toby's he's pretty good at saving us money where he can on stuff like that.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions or comments? Entertain a motion to approve.
So
moved to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously for the professional services contract. Item 6 would be discussion and consideration, possible action to rescind action of the airport board on March 11th, approving the consumer price index.
Yeah, so staff really apologizes about this. I hate to have the board approve things and rescind them, not a good practice. At the last airport board meeting, there was about 6 consumer price index adjustments that you all approved. It was on March 11th. And 3 of those actually had clerical errors that impacted the final amount to be billed. And so today, in 2 separate motions, 2 separate actions, rather, we're going to rescind these 3, and then the next item will be to approve these 3 again with new amounts, corrected versions. And then this will be taken to city council. We'll get this approved, and then we will get all the CPI adjusted invoices out to the tenants.
So those invoices haven't been sent out yet?
No, sir.
Okay.
So internal only. Nobody but this board saw that at that point.
Well, they can public records request. But
Sure, but we didn't send it out.
no, we didn't send it out.
No invoices have been sent, even the ones that were really probably could have already gone before city council, did not, because I've had many calls from tenants that are waiting on this. And I knew that the tenants talk, and some of them would say, well, I received it and paid it already. And another would say I didn't. So just across the board, we're going to wait till city council and you all approve it and we'll send it all out.
So that will include all ground leases.
The ground leases that weren't subject to CPI adjustments have been sent out.
Okay.
We've already collected the vast majority of those. This will just be for like 6 or 7 ground leases that are subject to it every 5 years.
Okay. Additional questions, comments? Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded to rescind the action of our airport board meeting on March 11th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Item 6, rescind the action. Number 7 is the discussion and consideration, possible action to approve the consumer price index amendments, A, B, and C. Any questions, comments? Entertain a motion to it. Okay, motion to second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Additional questions? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Item number 8 is a presentation on the fuel flowage fee collections and hangar ground lease revenues, which is pretty much all the revenue we've got around here.
That's right. I'll try to make this pretty quick. I know we've talked about a lot of this before. I'll try to do a quarterly fuel flowage fee revenue report for you all so you can see those collections and see what's increasing or decreasing over time. Just as a quick breakdown, this isn't really any new information. That's the typical spread of everything from our Jet A fuel to our 100 low lead. This is actually a pretty good range. Jet A fuel is accounting for 42 to 54% of Q1 sales. A lot of airports invest in Jet A fuel infrastructure and they don't see that return on investment. And so we're glad to have that at our airport. Another breakdown from 2023 to 2024, we had an 89% increase in fuel flowage fee collections. That's 10%, 10 cents on all fuel at delivery, and then an extra 10 cents at the 100 low lead self-serve tank. For this quarter, we actually saw a 23% decrease. I've discussed with the FBO on why that is, and we've determined that it is because in January, I believe they did not order Jet A fuel, and then in February, they didn't order avgas fuel, and we take it at delivery, not at point of sale. So if we took it at point of sale, we'd probably see different numbers, but it really comes out in a wash at the end of the year, whether it's delivery or sold. We also had obviously some weather issues. Everyone's aware of the freezing days and the days where we had high winds and fires, and no one's wanting to fly in that. So. Wanted to turn now to ground lease revenues. This was primarily what I wanted to focus on. Last year in FY24, and for those of you Edmond folks, when I say FY24, I mean Guthrie's fiscal year or federal for my ease. But our total expenditures was $287,000. Total revenues was little over $87,000. That includes lease payments, fuel flowage. We also earn interest in an interest fund. That miscellaneous income would probably be something like our hay bale revenue that we get, and we earn revenue per every bale out here at the airport. We're covering about a little over 30% of our expenditures. So that's not super great. But for an airport our size, you don't see that at a lot of general aviation airports being able to cover their expenses. For this year, we have a little over $66,000 in hangar ground lease revenue is anticipated. A portion of these dollars is going to go to paying a GPWA loan for the utilities in the corporate hangar development area. And so once we're a few years away from paying that off, and once we have that, the airport will continue to collect that revenue. But until now, we are glad to have that. So recommendations, what can we do to increase our ground lease revenue, we can amend renewal option language to be mutually abiding. So what I mean by this is in a lot of our existing leases, it'll give you an initial lease term and then it'll be a renewal term for 5 years or 10 years. Right now, as the language states, a lot of it says that the lessee can renew the lease term. It doesn't say anything about what the lessor can do. So while they can exercise their right to renew their term, we as the airport, we don't have any authority over that. And why that's important for it to be mutual is that we would be able to go back and say, well, is this tenant buying fuel? Does this tenant have an aircraft? How often is this tenant utilizing the airport? And then at that point, we can make determinations because obviously if it reverts back to the city, that's more revenue for us. We can increase ground lease rates to more appropriate amounts. I'll talk about that here in a second. We can consider including additional fees during the process. I don't want to necessarily jump into that because I think we've all probably dealt with unnecessary fees. It's a pretty big thing. But a lot of airports have started to do that because when someone wants to come and develop at their facility, it shows a level of seriousness if they're willing to put up some sort of fee. So wanted to present options to the board. I'm not necessarily advocating for a single option. Set standard rates and charges. This is something that I would like to do, look at doing at the next airport board meeting. As far as I can tell, this board has never formally set rates and charges. That's typically because there hasn't been a lot of physical assets to set rates and charges for. But even if this is a small document, I would like to get a board and council approved. That way, as an airport, we have something, a physical document that's publicly available, setting our goals, our rates. Plan ahead for leasehold reversions. So we know that hangar 20A with Morty, our leasehold with Morty Duke is coming up in 2030. And then hangar 13 with Gail Braden is coming up in 2031. And so both of these hangars, the hangar assets will be reverted back to the city, back to the airport, and we will be able to charge a fair rate. It won't be a ground lease rate for these hangar spaces. So making use of, do we know in 5 years, do we want to rent this hangar out, which is probably going to be our top option. But if this hangar is next to a taxi lane that has a poor pavement condition, we may want to work with the tenant to have it removed completely so that we can do repair work to the asphalt or concrete and then go from there.
Don't they get an option to release their building if they want first?
In most leases, they do. Yes. So are you talking about at the renewal period?
No, like you said that it expires in 2030 on one, 2031 on the other, and then it would revert back to the city.
Yes.
But in previous practice, they have given option to the person that has held it to release again.
They can release it to that person for the rate or for a fair rate of that hangar. So we could charge, for example, what someone would be paying at a T hangar to be storing their aircraft in there. They wouldn't be paying a ground lease rate. So for example, if I build a large 100 by 100 hangar, we're going to charge them 22 cents a square foot. But once that hangar reverts back to the city, we can charge what you would normally charge a tenant to be occupying that space.
I'm pretty sure they've done it to other tenants in the past and let them take a lease again instead of taking it completely back over, because then the city's completely responsible for the building at that point.
Right. And that's something that a lot of cities don't necessarily have the capacity to do. And so obviously if we were to get 50 hangar leases back all at once, within the next few years, like in 2033, I believe we're going to get 7 hangars back. I can tell you, we probably don't have the budget or staff to maintain 7 hangars, especially when it's been 30 years and they have a lot of issues with them. That's something we would have to look at when the
I just assume they give those options to the people because they put the money in to put the buildings there.
So that was based on the first term of the lease, whether 30, 35, whatever the time is.
Right.
So their investment is fulfilled in that period. If we want to release it back to them, we can, but they're not going to get it at 22 cents. That's what Kay was saying. They're not going to get it at 22 cents. Now they're going to pay the value for the hangar because it's now our asset as opposed to their asset.
Don't they get first right of refusal?
That's not fun.
That may be a requirement with the FAA that I'm not aware of, but in the lease agreements, I don't believe there's any language for first right of refusal.
No, but if it was 20, for example, it was 22 cents a square foot, that agreement is ended. And we're now gonna charge you 33 cents a square foot. Do you want to keep renting this hangar, or are we gonna lease it out to somebody else?
I don't believe the language in the leases requires that now, and I don't believe there's
I
a
don't think
reg
it
that
does.
requires, but I think, you know, as a good business practice, and speaking on behalf of myself as the city councilman from the city of Guthrie, I think we are not going to be in the best interest of the city to put people out of hangars if they are got a business that is, you know, substantially contributing to the airport. And that will be part of my comments with one hangar. Substantially contributing.
Did Gail have a 5-year option and decide not to exercise that?
That was just the lease term that he was given. There might be a 5-year option.
I'll bet there is. I
Right.
think there's options on all of our leases, aren't there?
Well, so surprisingly, in the case of hangar 20A, there is not. That tenant came to me, and unfortunately, at the time, they didn't write the renewal language in there. That's why it's important for us to update our language and get all the leases on the same board.
That would fit into your question as far as whether or not there's a first right of refusal.
And to take it one step further, as Vice Mayor Guthrie said, these are your decisions. I mean, it's going to come before you prior to that decision being made anyway. So I don't think anything Caden or this team has done has demonstrated a lack of being business friendly at the airport, and I don't think we would do that. So.
Amortization value, this is back to what Billy was saying. Lease terms should be based on level of investment in the airport. I'm communicating with other airports in the area to see how they go about determining the amortization value. There's lots of different, I was kind of fascinated at the amount of ways the airports look at that. And so kind of trying to find the best process for that. And then just as a note for you all, state law, the maximum lease term is 50 years. Okay, so I didn't want to dive too deep into the weeds here, but just to kind of visually show you airport's revenue versus expenses. These are our current ground lease rates. And so we are able to not bill the city of Edmond. We essentially are revenue producing for 2 months of the year. I've thrown 12, those are calendar icons up right there. I've shown 2 out of 12 we're revenue producing. And so for what I'm going to show you next, we're just going to assume that the annual expenditure is maintained at 300,000, which is about where we're at now. And then we'll assume that this is for every lease. So right now, currently covers 22% of airport operating costs and varies from a lease signed 30 years ago at 10 cents to a lease signed 5 years ago that was 22 cents and just moved up to 24. All right, so with this 25% alternative scenario, if we were to, and this is not something that is even possible, I just wanted to show you so that you understood. If we were to make every ground lease 25 cents, what would our revenue be? So we'd be able to cover nearly half of the airport's revenue within a year, about 40% of expenditures. Our forecasted revenue would be approximately $120,000. And the range here is what's important. I think on the last slide I mentioned we'll use the range to evaluate tenant impacts. So obviously we don't want to make it so high that now we're discouraging business development because no one wants to come here because our ground lease rate's so high. If we were to make it 25 cents, the largest hangar leasehold size impact would probably be $5,850 a year. And the smallest would be $282 a year. That's if this is higher than anything we've set thus far. If we were to make it 50 cents, we would cover nearly the whole year. 3 months of the year, we wouldn't be able to cover our expenses, but it'd cover 81%. Our revenue would be a little over $240,000. I think that this is the sweet spot. Our range tops at $14,000, still a very large increase. But we're looking at the difference between being able to cover our expenses 2 months of the year. Now we're covering it, if I can count, 8 months of the year, 9 months of the year. All right. So next steps, I'd like to start establishing rates and charges through the board and council. Like I mentioned earlier, that's something we haven't done in the past. I also want to work with Billy and write new standard lease agreements with you all, especially while right now we don't have a lot of hangar development in the works. And so now's the perfect time to examine what our leases have, and I'll be working with Billy on that soon. And then I know you all have been waiting on it. I've been waiting on it as well, acquiring adjacent property for hangar expansion. Because having more hangars that sign these agreements and provide more of this revenue, or eventually even both cities working together to construct hangars, is going to be how we produce more revenue in the future. So thanks for that. That's all I had. I'm going to stand up here for that.
Just a quick question as far as the commercial hangar development area right now. Do we have an estimate of what the total square feet is out in that area and what the additional revenue would be once it becomes ours?
So once
The loan's paid off?
once it becomes ours, or I say ours, it kind of is, but once the loan is paid off, I think it'll be around anywhere from 15 to 20,000 extra dollars.
For the total?
Yes.
And that's at 22 cents a square foot for 5 hangars.
22 cents a square foot. It's grown to, well, it's now about 8 hangars.
Does that include Brad's?
Brad's is included.
Okay. So about, what was that again? What was the number?
It'll be around 15 to 20.
15 to 20, there's no revenue. Okay.
I have a question on your last 2 slides. On the last slide, you showed a scenario where the largest hangar at a 50-cent ground lease would be $14,040. But on the 25-cent scenario on the previous slide, it's not half of that total. I was expecting that to be $7,020 and it's $5,850. Can you explain that for me?
You know, that's a good point. I think what it could have been is, I know that hangar 1 is actually messed up because the ground lease there has hangar 1, 1A, and the ramp.
Okay.
And so what may have caused the problem there is I may have switched that up incorrectly.
Okay.
I can get you a better number on
Okay.
what that is.
Just trying to reconcile that in my head.
Yeah. That should definitely.
Hangar 1 is in jeopardy, isn't it, as far as the construction of a new terminal and restaurant? Won't that disappear?
Is in jeopardy.
I mean, they're gonna tear it down and
Oh, hangar 1A.
1A.
Yes.
Okay.
We're able to construct, as far as our plans go, I'll say we're able to construct the terminal without tearing that hangar down. That's how I'll answer that.
And I think there was a previous plan, which included tearing down
Yes.
that hangar, but that's not the plan that we're working on.
Not now.
No,
Okay.
fine.
All right. Thank you.
Not to say that won't come back in the future for your review and approval, but that's not the plan today.
Which hangar are you talking about?
Is that the really old one?
Yes.
Far right, northeast corner.
Right here, white roof.
One more.
One more than the white roof?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, very old one.
What about the porta ports? Do they go away with the new terminal building?
They will need to go away with the apron expansion.
One's already gone. For burn airplane would be able.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments on that report? There's a lot there to kind of mulch. So I think that the direction that you pointed out that you'd like to start out was setting the standard. Is that correct? That number 1?
Rates and charges.
Okay. Rates and charges.
So currently, the delta is made up by the city of Guthrie and the city of Edmond sending money to cover operations
Yes, sir.
for the year. So you're looking to get rid of the need for those 2 cities to send you money just to operate.
Yes. If we can decrease general fund transfers, that helps the city, and it really will also help us advocate for putting more money back for capital project matches. For those of you who don't know, all revenue, if we were a revenue generating airport, the city can't take that revenue and go use it on a water treatment facility or to prepare a road outside of town. It has to be maintained and kept on the airport. And so we would most likely be able to set up a revolving fund to help fund our large scale projects.
Any feel for the impact it would have on current tenants? Here's why I'm asking the question. America today, inflation is just murder, and a lot of people are already struggling. So, if you take and give this kind of an increase, what does that do to those people that may already be on the edge of, man, I can't stand this hangar lease?
Well, so I would recommend a phased option, not just throwing it up to 50 cents willy-nilly. Right now we're at 22. I think moving to something 225, between 25 to 50. This property, once we develop on the new property that we're acquiring, we'll sign some long-term agreements that we're not getting that land back for future use. And as the Oklahoma City Metro continues to grow this way, Edmond continues to grow, Guthrie continues to grow, this is going to become a very competitive real estate area for aviation development. And that's why I think now's the time we probably need to capitalize on that a little bit as an airport to make sure that we're keeping up with our maintenance costs.
Have we looked at other airports and done a study on how these rates compare to other airports?
Yes, so we are actually, where we're currently sitting is about where other airports are. Wiley Post Airport is much higher than we are. And I'm moving our rate, not to Wiley standard because we want to maintain our competitive edge. But I do want us to grow these rates more than probably the airports around us.
What is Wiley's rate?
I'm told it's around 70 cents to, it could be $1.
Okay.
And one of our goals has been, in talking about the two cities, as we acquire more land and have additional land for hangar lease agreements, as Katie mentioned, my goal is to get us to a point where it's self-sustaining and we can throw that money into capital projects. So that way it's not, we're sitting here and for 3 years, we're doing historic projects at the airport. No, let's continue doing capital projects and not be so far behind on deferred maintenance that we have to do historic projects. That's one of my goals. I think hearing from our retreat last year, the board wanted to see that land acquisition and those future hangars developed as well. So taking your vision and implementing it, this is just one piece of that. And Ken, I don't think you're looking for action today on this item. This is just discussion, right? Okay. So it's something to ponder. I think it is in line with our past practice of not surprising you with anything. So having the conversation, talking about it, 1 or 2 meetings, making sure that we explore all avenues the board would like to see. And then by the time you have an action item, it's something that's been thoroughly vetted by both the board, both cities, and our legal counsel.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think Wiley's able to hang on to that because of the WPA representation of the property values. And they have a pretty good influence with the Oklahoma City Council. They can get in there and sit on that price. They're not built out, but they're getting close. So their values, supply and demand, have raised to justify that. We, on the other hand, don't have a WPA. We have a pilots association, but it's more or less representing the aviation community and aviation issues. If we get into a situation where we start moving on these rates, I think you'll see that there'll be some pressure of hangar owners to have a voice in where and how it goes. So we should be prepared for that. The other thing is that I'm wondering if Stan, was it 3 or 4 years ago that Shalon put together that survey? Have you seen the survey that she did of all the airports, central Oklahoma prices, fuel price, hangar lease?
Yes, Max, the intern over at Max Westheimer, he or she puts together a annual survey of airports like you're
It's
describing.
annual.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we do have access to that.
Yes,
I think that would be a really good document to keep on top of the desk, don't you?
for sure.
Especially when we start trying to decide nickels and dimes.
Right.
That type of thing.
And that's something we can get out to the board in an email so they can have it.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. Questions or comments on the airport directors, or other than the fact the guy does a wonderful job? I mean, really, it's good stuff.
I don't speak something on this issue. I've kind of dealt with rate hikes at other airports before as well. But one of the typical things I've seen is when we would implement a rate hike at others, now this was on the leasing side, is the first planes to go when you would increase rates on it were typically the people that couldn't justify the price to begin with. And that came from people who probably weren't utilizing their aircraft like they should. So in the event we do get some people that get a little frustrated with the price of the ground lease, they're typically the ones that are sitting in the hangar for the most part, and getting out of there. And we're usually replaced by a customer that would probably fly their airplane more, that then in turn turned into flow rates for the airport and things like that. Also, we would look into concessions being made. I think you used the term mutually beneficial. So there are certain services that the airport needs. I know I'm in that group. Mr. Husky's in that group. That you know, considerations were made for those kind of things. You know, there were services that the airport would need that I couldn't provide as an FBO manager or as the airport manager to the customers, and we really worked hard. That's worth something to the airport, right? You know, yeah.
Yeah. Additional questions or comments? So we move to the,
I assume, to piggyback on Justin's comment, that when you raised and you did branded jet fuel, the jet fuel's actually increased, right?
Yes, yeah. There, we have.
I mean, it's perceived as a more prestigious product, right?
Exactly.
Right, and that people are willing to bring their jets here.
And in turn, that comes with some national marketing that helps bring airports here, that we get by using branded jet fuel, as well as training for myself and the employees, and rather regular checks, buy ab fuel, so that you know, the fuel is guaranteed on the up and up and ready to go.
In the rates and charges, have you ever considered, new kid here, have you ever considered some kind of a policy or a charge to the hangar queens? Going to what you're saying, they're here, they occupy a hangar, they don't fly, they don't buy fuel, they're just sitting in the hangar. So you don't get the operations, you don't get the services that are needed, they're not buying fuel. So if they're not, then we entertain the value of, or an idea of, if you're not flying at least, then we're gonna charge you this. Keep your airplane here at the airport. Because the airport has got to remain whole somehow. And if they're not helping you stay whole, then they need to go.
Right. I think that one thing on that note that we need to do is look at, in this rates and charges policy, making it clear that if you have non-aeronautical equipment here, you're going to pay a fair market value to store it on our airport property. We currently don't have something like that formally written, but I think that would probably be an appropriate sub-measure before we get to something like that. We have some non-aeronautical use still going on out here.
Walt, have you seen an agreement like that somewhere else at another airport?
Yes. No, I haven't. I've seen it talked about, I've heard it talked about a lot over the years.
I just wondered if there was
Because it's real.
something we could model.
Because it's real, and I'm sure that somebody has done that by now. And so, you know, it could probably be searched out and found. But it's a real issue.
that's going to become a lease issue.
Yeah, I was curious like how we would mechanically structure that. So I don't know if there's a way to have like a second lease rate for operating and non-operating aircraft, or if you have, I don't know how you charge people for that and how that's accounted for. I was just curious if there's an example that we could look at.
There are vacant building taxes in some places.
Mhm.
I mean, we've discussed doing that.
I mean, there's
City of
there
Guthrie.
are airplanes all across the country, especially as how old the fleet is getting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a mechanical thing, like, I don't know how we go inspect logbook every year or.
Well, like for instance, the one
Take a
that hit the deer, it's still sitting around waiting for this and that and the other. And how long ago did that happen? And there's
Almost a year ago.
really nothing that, you only move so fast in some of those instances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that
I mean-
airplane's been bought 2 more times since
Right,
then.
well, they're still doing stuff to it. Hell, it's over in my hangar now.
Yeah.
No,
But, I'm not working on it, the other guys are.
Well, most of your based aircraft, I think you can know how much fuel they buy each year.
Mhm.
You might be able to look at their Hobbs meter at the beginning of the year and say, okay, you got this many hours on the machine. Next year, you look at the Hobbs meter again and say, you only flew 3 hours last year,
Mhm.
you know?
But what if they flew to 150 and they only brought gas here 2 times?
Right.
yeah.
At least you know they are operational. I don't know. It's a difficult thing.
My last note on that is with our new tracking software, I inputted everyone's tail number and it will shoot out a table and it'll tell me how many times they landed and took off in a year
Mhm.
with their tail number. So I would feasibly have access to be able to see that.
That could be touched on, by our minimum standards. You know, what we require and require not. Again, as far as fueling, and there is a pretty good section in our minimum standards about that type of thing, for sure. As opposed to getting into the lease thing, I think that would be pretty convoluted, to say the least.
I definitely think starting with the rates and charges just as a broad beginning would be really good. So,
It wouldn't be easy. It'd probably keep Mr. Wheeler pretty busy.
Job security.
Okay, additional comments, questions?
Director?
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. That's all good stuff, like I said before, so. We can move to, item 10, which would be, requests and comments from the board members and attendees. Stan, would you like to start off?
Well, just one question. I don't know if everybody knows about the fire that we had out here last Friday. I don't know if you'd like to bring people up to speed, what happened and how it was resolved.
you know, Stan, you're reading my mind. I was prepared for that. The investigation's still ongoing, but just so you hear from me, a Piper Lance, it was 1973 model, I think. He was defueling the aircraft to test avionics, and with some kind of equipment he was using caused a spark. Luckily, the plane was towed out of the T hangar, and so and it was a rainy day. Guthrie Fire and EMS had a very swift response. They were able to put it out. No injuries, but it did obviously was substantial, complete damage to the aircraft. We were still working with the tenant to resolve some issues with the insurance, but other than that, that's all I have on that.
Oh, yeah, that is total.
Yeah,
Oh,
pretty devastating.
And then one other comment, and I don't know if it'd be too much trouble for you, but with the program you have to track flights in and out of the airport, would it be possible each month during your report to say, hey, we had this many jets, this many single engines, this many, just kind of, keep telling. I'm kind of curious how much traffic we have in and out of here.
Yeah.
If that's not too much trouble.
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt, but I think we skipped item number 9, which would have been his report that had some of these items on it. I think we skipped over the airport director's report.
I think we did. Oh,
We skipped item number 9.
That's okay. I've heard enough of myself talk, so I'm
A
good.
lot of those questions were actually.
Addressed in eight,
Yeah.
that's true.
I'll run through this really quick.
Right.
We had a visit Edmond tour yesterday. I want to thank everyone from Visit Edmond that came out. We also had the acting Edmond city manager. I don't know if he's still on here. Thank you all for coming out. It was a great discussion. We talked about joining more at the Edmond Chamber and hosting Edmond Chamber events here at the airport. I know we do a lot with the Guthrie Chamber. And so just working on increasing our Edmond partnerships. Walt, you're going to want to close your ears for this one. We had OSU and OU AAAE student airport managers came out to the airport. As much as I favored the OSU group, they were a really good group of students. They asked really good questions and even gave me a lot of really good ideas. So thanks for them for coming. I also wanted to welcome our newest flight school, actually, Mr. John Wise with Confidence Flight Training, doing light aerobatic training. Wanted to give him a shout out as well. So excited to see him start up.
Excellent.
And lastly, my last update was our summer flight camp is going to be from May 29th to May 31st. The first 2 days, we're going to be with the Sooner Flight Academy. And then the last day, EAA Chapter 1098 is going to come out and take those kids on a discovery flight around the area. I'm glad to be able to put this back on. It'll be right in this room. We'll have, so Justin, there's your days to take off right there. Kids ages 8 to 12 will be attending. And so if you have a kid or grandkid that'd be interested in attending, please get with me and we'll make it happen. That's all I had.
What's our opportunity for enrollment? I mean, how many can we accommodate?
We can accommodate 20. I have 11 as of this morning so far. So.
Ryan, what do you think? That's enough? You're right. That's a lot. Well,
Center Flight Academy. I'm telling on myself, but I've been around since its inception. And I have watched over the years the results of bringing these kids in and watching them go from to that. It's just an amazing program. So, you know, if you can promote that in the community, get those kids out here, go to flight camp. It's crazy. My grandson really wanted to learn how to fly, and I told him he couldn't do it. He can't fit in an airplane, he's 6'7". So getting in that machine is a little difficult for him. But it really is a great program. Thank you for bringing that forward. The AAA students, I like them all. And that's a good thing too. We kind of kicked that off, started that a number of years ago. I'm glad to see it still going. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for your reporting. A lot to think on.
Grant, what do you think?
I just wanted to piggyback on what the director talked about in terms of revenue and sort of go back through a brief history. I will tell you that if I'm paid to talk, I normally love to hear my voice. I'm a lawyer, and so if I'm standing up and talking for money, I'll talk forever. But as a city manager can tell you, normally during meetings that I chair for the city council, I attempt to get through that as quickly as possible. I've thought about imposing a standing requirement of all councilmen so that they won't take too long. But I do want to sort of go over the revenues and from a historic perspective. From the time that I've been involved at the airport and have been flying out here, which started in 1986. In 1987, City Council approved the extension or the pursuit of the extension of the runway. I mean, in 1986, when I first came out here, Guthrie was a sleepy little airport. We had an FBO that had a couple of planes. They sold some gas and they taught some students. That expansion of the runway allowed for an enormous amount of more development at the airport, and we got Zevco. And I failed to mention this during the chamber coffee, and I feel badly because one of the things that we have in Guthrie that is really unique is a opportunity to highlight the history of aviation in Oklahoma, and Zevco is part of that. In the mid 1990s and 1996, they manufactured the Edge, which was the most commonly used aircraft in the world air race series, and I don't think many people in Guthrie know that. I don't think, or many people in Edmond know that the number one most popular aircraft that was used in air racing and in aerobatics for a long time was manufactured and developed here at Guthrie Airport. In 1997, we worked to extend the runway and create the taxiways, and that led to more development at the airport. Today, as Kate mentioned, John Weiss has started a new flight school for which I'm excited about. That means that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 flight schools operating on the airport. And I think that that is an enormous, boost to interest in aviation and the airport community. If you haven't ever taken a ride and done spin training or, some light aerobatics and gentleman aerobatics, John is happy to do that. He's the one who taught me aerobatics. So I'm enormously indebted to him for introducing me to that world. If you haven't done that, the EAA and IAC have an organization that does competitive aerobatic competitions worldwide. Probably less than 3,000 is what the estimate is. Less than 3,000 people have participated in some kind of aerobatic beyond spin. All CFIs have to go through spin, but anything more than spin, less than 3%. That means that if you've done this, like if you've experienced it, you're a unicorn, right? John, who's a CFI who teaches it, is not just a unicorn. He's a unicorn that is there. He's the byproduct of the mating of a unicorn and a Pegasus, in my opinion, to be able to teach this. I think he's the only one in the state that is offering that kind of advanced training, and I think you should take advantage of that, and I encourage everybody to do that. And if you haven't seen his new plane, it's right out in the hangar. After the board meeting, you're welcome to go look at it, and I think he's always happy to show it off. So going along with that, we have started a new IAC chapter here in Oklahoma to revive the chapter that we lost many years ago to try to increase interest in aerobatic competition. And so that chapter and the officers are meeting this Saturday here at the airport to discuss how we go forward and finalize. We've sent off all of the documents I think that are required for getting a chapter started and then developing a first sort of meet and greet for anybody who's interested in IAC. If you are an EA member, which I know some people in this room, like myself, own experimental aircraft, it's not that much more expensive to join IAC, and it's well worth the money and the interest that it creates. And to go up to the national finals, which are in Salina, Kansas, it's an experience that you won't forget. So that's my positive thing. I have 2 questions that I want to raise as the representative from the great city of Guthrie, Oklahoma. The first is, again, Mr. Burgess is still operating in the hangar. He was there today, for example. What's the status of that, Mr. Faulkner or Mr.?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so we're still working on it. Be happy to visit more
Okay.
outside of the meeting.
Okay. Can we have an agenda item if we're stalled somewhere? Is there?
I don't think we're stalled.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're moving forward. The things we discussed last time. One of the key points was recovering the funds for the costs of relocating the fuel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
So getting that into the petition, we reviewed that mutually. I think it's been 2 weeks ago now. And so the next step is having all of that filed, and I'll make sure that we get you an update soon.
Okay, so I appreciate it. Yes. The second is what appears to be somebody raised the port issues and whether or not they're going to go away. We start the expansion, like the abandoned port that just seems to be hanging out there with doors open, take off at any moment. Is there any movement on that?
So the owner of that port owns the T Hangar 14 and actually has in his leasehold that space behind there. We were wanting to get the ports from the ramp removed. He was asked to remove it over there, especially I don't think he had an aircraft, or if he did, it was unairworthy, removed behind the existing T Hangar 14. When I call it T Hangar 14, it's more like, put together ports in a row.
Right.
He was required to secure that in place. My understanding is that he had done so. If that's not the case, we'll need to check in with that tenant. I believe it's been secured in place. He has been asked to find a tenant for that or have it removed from the airport, and we are still working with him on doing so.
That's all I have. Thank you.
As far as I know, he's got a tenant for that hangar and he's made a deal with the guy to finish what needs to be done so the doors can close with less issue.
That's good to know. Thanks, Ryan. I was not aware of that.
Okay, what do you think?
Thank you, Mr. Director. I appreciate your efforts.
Absolutely. Kathy, Kathy, anything you'd like to add to our discussion? If not, entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Second. Moved and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is